Movement is a group of high-profile lawmakers working to elect candidates who denounce political extremes. And joining us now are two members of that movement, former Republican governor of New Jersey, Todd Whitman, and Miles Taylor. He served at the Department of Homeland Security from 2017 to 2019, including as chief of staff, and was the anonymous author of a 2018 guest essay for the New York Times, you remember it, criticizing President Donald Trump's leadership. So you both co-author a new piece for the Times entitled, "We Are Republicans. There's only one way to save our party from pro-Trump extremists." Governor Whitman, what is that way forward?
Well, that way is to support those candidates who stand up to the big lie, who believe in democracy and the rule of law, whichever side of the aisle they appear on, whichever side of the ballot. It's getting Republicans to understand that if their choice is a Republican extreme candidate versus a centrist Democrat, they should vote for the Democrat, and vice versa. Because it's been fascinating because since we put out this op-ed, I've had almost as much response from Democrats saying, we hear you, we're worried, we're ready to cross the aisle, as I had from Republicans, which tells you there's a real hunger out there for the center to find some place to go. And that's what we're trying to create. But starting with, because we're Republicans, trying to get the Republican Party back to the center by supporting the kinds of candidates that represent what the party used to stand for.
So before I get to Miles, Christine, I wonder what these historic times are really ready for. Forming a new party that includes Democrats and Republicans, or Republicans taking their party back? Because I feel like the Republican Party has been stolen. Am I wrong?
No, you're right. And we're going to try to get the Republican Party back, but we're going to watch these 2022 elections very, very closely. And I believe we are at a point where this time a third party could work. The problem is you have so many barriers in the states and at the federal level in order to, for instance, to get into the sanctioned presidential debates, which really give you the earned media that you need to be a credible candidate. Those barriers are just incredibly biased. It's not supposed to be for a Republican or Democrat. It's supposed to be unbiased. They're not. And they make it almost impossible for anyone outside of the two major parties to stand on those platforms. But we can do it. And it's going to take an awful lot of work. But we're ready to do that because I believe I can speak for, I'll let Miles speak for himself. But for many of us, we're really concerned about our democracy.
So, Miles, who are the renewers and how are you getting them on board? What makes this different? I know there's lots of, subsets of groups that are just, despondent, quite frankly, about the state of the Republican Party. Who are you getting on board and how are you galvanizing this movement to get out into the forefront?
Well, galvanizing it is actually the easy part. A lot of these people view what's happened to my party, the Republican Party, that it's become a party of Muppets, except I don't remember the Muppets ever trying to overturn democracy. We saw how farcical it was yesterday when Donald Trump urged Republicans to not vote in 22 and 24. So that's something that's probably going to make my and the governor's job easier. But what we're doing is we're pulling together a coalition in what we call coalition campaigning. We're having Republicans reach across the aisle to Democrats and vice versa to support this cohort. Now, what we've identified is a group of Republicans, independents, and Democrats that we see as unifiers. And we are calling on them. And by we, I mean the 150 former Republican governors, senators, congressmen, cabinet secretaries that are behind the Renew America movement. We're calling on Republicans around the country to go support these moderates that we're releasing today and put country over party. And we think that's the only way to not just save the GOP and give it an opportunity to reform by protecting some of the good Republicans, but protecting our democracy from GOP control of bodies like the U.S. House of Representatives. And the last thing I'd add to that, Mika, is this has worked before. It worked in the 2020 election. The governor and I and many others tried to mobilize disaffected Republicans to flip and support support Joe Biden. And in key battleground states, President Biden largely was able to win because of those Republicans that flipped sides. So this is doable, and we're urging voters to now do this at the local level in the midterms.
Governor Whitman, good morning. It's Willie Geist. So this obviously is a noble effort to root out extremism in our politics. But the fact of the matter is, as you both have just pointed out, the incentives within the Republican Party right now, at least, are to stand with Donald Trump. If you're somebody who seeks office, if you're Vice President Pence, to begin now to dismiss what happened on January 6th as just another day in January, despite the fact he was being pursued by those mobs, whether it's Steve Scalise going on television, not willing to say that Joe Biden won the election, whether it's Chuck Grassley standing on that stage, it appears that the Republican Party, by and large, has cast its lot, and they're siding with Donald Trump. People like Anthony Gonzalez in the state of Ohio, a star, a football star who turned into a political star, is retiring because he doesn't believe he can win in this climate as a Republican who has crossed Donald Trump and voted to impeach him. So how do you break that fever within the party where you served as governor?
Well, a lot of those people who are not speaking up are not happy with where they are, but they don't feel anyone has their back. And what we're looking for is those that have at least indicated that they work across the aisle. They really want to put an end to this undermining of the public's confidence in our electoral system. And that's what's really scary. But so that's why we're reaching out to Democrats saying, vote for the centrist Republican, and Republicans vote for the centrist Democrat, because we feel very strongly that we can't, if you have both houses, if they flip, even if the House flips, that's going to be dangerous for us, because you're right. Those who continue to self-identify as Republicans, for the large part, I mean, there's some like Miles and myself who are still hold the Republican label and are not Trumpers. They are Trumpers. But if you look at the overall registration numbers, Republican numbers are going down, and it's the independents and the unaffiliated who are going up. And those, to a large part, are dissident Republicans as well as dissident Democrats that are worried about the extremes to which our parties seem to be pushing themselves. And they understand that our country is much better served by a center-right and a center-left party, where people can come together on the important issues that affect our everyday lives and get some things done and protect our democracy. And that's where we are. Our democracy is fragile. We're the longest lived of these experiments in new governments. If people read their history, would understand that, unfortunately, we've seen governments like ours fall in the past, going back to Greece. We need to protect our democracy, and it's worth the fight. And that's what we're in for, the battle.
Miles, Elise Jordan here, just to play devil's advocate, and not because I'm not sympathetic at all. I am a former Republican myself. This is the era of extreme political polarization, and people are drawn to their extremes, and it's what attracts and drives voters overall. You hear from so many voters, they might not care about policy issues, but they want to be against them. And particularly Republican voters are so stuck in their party identity and won't cross lines, even if a candidate is very questionable and abhorrent on certain issues. How does a group make moderation have any appeal in this day and age when we've seen so many other efforts to, bring politics back to the center and they haven't been successful?
Yeah, well, look, first I would say this. I'm in your camp. I mean, I've been cynical about this for years. The discord in our discourse has gotten worse and worse and worse. But my friends call me Mr. Brightside for a reason, and that's because I look into these numbers and I actually see some cause for hope. And the governor just alluded to it. We're actually seeing a surge in the number of Americans who say they're no longer part of either political party because they're sick of it. They're sick of the rhetoric, and they now self-identify as independents. In fact, now 50% of Americans identify as political independents. So the way I read that is that there is consumer demand at the grassroots level for something different. Now, it's kind of a silent majority, but these are the people that you and I know that go to barbecues and they hear folks spout conspiracy theories and say that Joe Biden is a socialist reptilian humanoid, and they walk away wide-eyed and say, this is not my tribe. So what we need to do first and foremost is create a tribe for the tribalists, these disaffected Republicans and centrists, but also give them candidates that they can go support. And again, I'll say, this can be a majority-making coalition, even if our numbers are small. When you look at some of these close races that could decide the outcome of the House and the Senate, we're only talking about margins of 2 or 3%. We don't need to move 50 million Republicans into joining us in this centrist movement. We only need to move a smaller margin in key battlegrounds around the country. We think that is very doable, and that's why we're going to go invest in these races and try to kick out some of the radicals and support the rational Republicans and Democrats that are running for office.
Governor Whitman, it's Jonathan Lemire. You're obviously targeting the centrist and disaffected Republicans, but let's talk for a minute about those who are on the extreme part of the party. We're seeing right now efforts in state legislatures to restrict access to the ballot. We're seeing efforts Trump-backed candidates to become Secretary of States in some of the key battlegrounds that could loom large in 2024, raising real concerns about the certification of the vote, and perhaps the election will be given to someone who doesn't actually win it. You've been in the party for a long time. You know that. What are you seeing out there? How concerned are you about these efforts? How much faith do you have that the 2024 election will be conducted fairly?
Well, I'm very concerned about what I'm seeing. That's why I'm co-chairing the States United Democracy Center, and we're working very closely with those who support democracy in the states that are being targeted to give them the ammunition they need to be able to push back against some of these new laws and some of the lies that are being spread. I mean, we should be proud. The 2020 election was a huge success. We had more people voting in the middle of a pandemic in an election where the incumbent administration had been saying for months ahead of time, it's going to be stolen, there's going to be fraud. And yet people came out and they voted and they understood the importance of the election. And it was free, fair, and accurate, as has been proven over and over again in the courts. But I believe that what we're seeing today, I am certain of it, is not just random attacks just because people have nothing better to do. It is a concerted effort to undermine the public's confidence in our electoral system so that it will be easier if they lose, they being the extreme Republicans, if they lose in 2022 or 2024, they can try to overturn those elections. And what's extra scary to me is the number of 21 million Americans who believe it is okay to resort to violence to overthrow an election. I mean, this is the United States of America. We're starting to act like a third world country, and we've got to be aware of that. People have got to understand that this is important, it's critical, it's scary, and we are the only ones who can push back and make the difference. And that's what Miles and I are trying to do with Renew America, and it's what we're trying to do at States United Democracy Institute.
Well, thank you very much. Christine, Todd, Whitman, and Miles Taylor, thank you both. We'll see how your efforts take action. We really, really hope it can make an impact.